This is the dark side of Canada's agriculture industry that you probably didn't know. Just like cities, farm fields also experience crimes, but these are not your typical murder and assaults. Instead, these crimes are focused on animals and agriculture. Farm Crime is a true crime documentary that investigates bizarre cases. Some of these cases involve the disappearance of sheep that happened in the middle of the night in a farm in Ontario, as well as a multi-million-dollar pigeon Ponzi scheme which allowed farmers to make so much additional income by breeding pigeons. And I know this might sound harmless, but the motive to this entire scheme had many people questioning about this entire operation. But the case that had me really hooked was when sewing needles began appearing inside potatoes in grocery stores. And as crazy as that sounds, the culprits were never found. Each episode of Farm Crime captures each story through the lens of the people involved. Click the link in my bio to watch season 1 to 3 of Farm Crime on Canada's free streaming service CBC Gem.
A poison expert has been accused of killing his wife by poisoning. 30-year-old Connor Bowman from Minnesota was married to his 32-year-old wife, Betty. Betty was a pharmacist described by her loved ones as vibrant and outgoing. She loved traveling and lived life to the full. Now, Connor specialized in poison science, and in August, his wife was hospitalized. She was showing symptoms resembling that of food poisoning. On the 20th of August, just 4 days after her hospital admission, she suddenly passed away. It would be 2 months after her death that Connor was arrested, accused of administering a substance that is fatal in high doses. Shockingly, there is evidence that he Google searched Betty's weight and determined what dose would be fatal. It's alleged that his online searches also included queries about whether internet searches can be used in court. Connor has been charged with second-degree murder.
Nothing scares me like Appalachia. So this Thanksgiving, Paige Hills was meeting her boyfriend's family for the first time in Appalachia. And basically, immediately upon driving into the area, she starts getting a bad feeling. She chalks it up to nerves, but it keeps getting worse that night. The family was all having dinner inside, but there was a window open. And Paige starts to hear whistling coming from the woods through the window. She doesn't really think anything of it because maybe someone was outside smoking. But that night the whistling comes back, louder. And on top of that, it sounds like someone is saying her name over and over and over again. So she goes to the window to see what's up, and there's just two red eyes staring back at her from the woods. The next morning at breakfast, she asked the family what that could have been, and they immediately looked like they saw a ghost. They told her to never speak of it ever again, and the next time she hears something, no she didn't. So Paige is freaked out, but she has another night in the house. And that's when her boyfriend pulls her aside to show her this photo. This is what their trail cam caught the night before, and she was to never mention it again.
This woman admitted to committing attempted murder to someone she didn't realize was a police officer. Peggy Valentine is a 44-year-old woman from Louisiana. On May the 4th, 2022, she entered the home of her fiance's girlfriend's mum. She forced entry into the home armed with a box cutter in the early hours of the morning. It was then that she attacked the mother in her sleep. It's reported that Peggy's fiancé had been seeing another woman who recently had given birth to his child. Peggy reportedly stated that she went to the house simply to try and catch her fiancé in the lie, and things escalated. After the attack, she was feeling obviously very guilty and went to her pastor to confess. He advised that she handed herself in. She hadn't actually realised that he was also a major with the parish sheriff's office. She claimed that she went into the house without the intention to hurt anybody, but the situation got out of hand. Peggy's attorney argued that the conversation between the pastor and Peggy shouldn't have been admissible in court. However, the judge disagreed. Peggy is due to be sentenced in February next year.
Have you guys seen these 2023 predictions that were made 100 years ago? Some of them are hysterical, but some of them are like eerily accurate. The first one just says no more hard work by 2023. And it says that we're not going to work more than 4 hours a day because of electricity. It also says that every city will be a spotless town. But oh no, this one says we should worry because men will be wearing curls and women will be shaving their heads. Which, this is the least of my concerns in the world we've created for ourselves. And then this one really doubles down on the curls for men. This one got really close, so it tried to predict our population in 2023 at 300 million people. And as of July 1st, 2022, we were at 333 million. This was a really ambitious one because flying had just been invented, but it said you'd be able to fly from Chicago to Hamburg in 18 hours. And we actually figured out how to do it in half that time. This one was kind of spooky because it says that people will not begin the day by reading the world's news, but by listening to it. I don't know if they predicted that NPR was going to have a whole podcasting arm, but that one is very accurate. And then this one has been freaking a lot of people out because it says watch-size radio telephones will keep everybody in communication with the end of the earth. In the early 1920s, you couldn't even dial phone numbers. You had to be connected to an operator every time you picked up the phone. So the fact that they predicted that we would have small phones that also broadcasted radio and talk on them, and we could call anywhere in the world, is like kind of amazing.
The Nickelodeon Creep Club is a nickname given to these 5 men who behaved inappropriately with minors while working at Nickelodeon. Today we're talking about Marty Weiss. So Marty Weiss was a well-renowned talent scout in Hollywood that worked primarily with children. He had a number of high-profile underage clients, including people that worked on shows like iCarly. So this meant that he was in direct communication with kids a lot. And like I said before, he was very well respected and he had a lot of clients. Well, in 2011, Marty's world came crashing down when a former client of his came to the police and said that he had been assaulted by Marty 30 to 40 times years ago when he was only 15. He then went to Marty's apartment, confronted him with the allegations, and secretly videotaped his reaction. Marty then allegedly told the victim that what was happening was very common in the entertainment industry, and if the victim were to tell anybody, that it would hurt their career and hurt the both of them. Authorities believe that Marty Weiss has a number of victims that will never come forward because they're ashamed of what happened to them. And it's absolutely sickening to look at all of the shows that this guy was involved with. A lot of shows, obviously, that involved mainly children, like Good Luck Charlie, iCarly, The Muppets. It's crazy. But it just goes to show that Nickelodeon really never vetted the people that they hired back in the 2000s. There were so many different instances like this. And it also shows that people like Marty seek out employment at places like Nickelodeon and Disney because they're going to know that they have access to children. Unfortunately, though, he's only number 3 in the Creep Club, so next we're going to talk about Jason M. Handy.
Was stabbed and killed by a former student turned terrorist at the Gambetta Carnot High School in Arras, France. My name is Dominique Bernard, and I was a beloved French teacher, deeply cherished by all my students at Gambetta Carnot High School in Arras, France. On the fateful day of Friday, October 13, 2023, our school was rocked by an unimaginable act of violence. An armed former student, wielding a knife with malicious intent, burst onto the playground. Fear instantly spread across the faces of everyone present, and the playground, once filled with the sounds of joy, was now echoing with the screams of terrorized students. In a desperate attempt to shield my students and colleagues from harm, I confronted the assailant. It was a moment of sheer courage and selflessness, but the attacker was determined and ruthless. I sustained multiple knife wounds in the struggle to protect those around me. Tragically, I did not survive the encounter. The aftermath was a scene of devastation, students left in a state of trauma, a community plunged into mourning, and a school reeling in shock. The details of that day are seared into the collective memory of our school, a harrowing reminder of the senseless brutality that shattered the sanctity of our educational haven. I implore you to share this story, to raise our voices in unison against the scourge of violence and hatred. Let us stand together in the pursuit of a safer, more peaceful future for the generations to come.
Convicted of double murder back in 1985 in Arizona, Jens Soering is now living free in his home country of Germany, and he's just become the subject of a new documentary that's landed today on Netflix. On April 3rd, 1985, Jens' girlfriend's parents were found murdered in their own home, with stab wounds so severe that their heads had almost been separated from their bodies. By the time the bodies were discovered, Nancy and Derek's daughter Elizabeth and her boyfriend Yen were already in Washington, and by the time they'd been identified as suspects, they'd fled to the UK. It was a year before they were found and arrested and taken back to the US, and Elizabeth professed her innocence and said that it was Yen that had killed her parents. She admitted to being guilty of being an accessory to murder, and she was handed a 90-year sentence. In 1990, Yen was found guilty of 2 counts of murder, and he was handed 2 consecutive life sentences. However, in 2019, the Virginia Parole Board announced that both Elizabeth and Yen would be released from prison. Yen was deported to his home country of Germany and Elizabeth to Canada. They have both been banned from re-entering the US and cannot make contact with each other. Yen claims that he's completely innocent and did not commit the murders of Elizabeth's parents. There's so much to this case. It's a really, really interesting one. And if you get time to watch it, I definitely recommend it. It's dropped today on Netflix and is called Till Murder Do Us Part. This woman has been spared the death penalty after agreeing to a plea deal this week in which she pleaded guilty to the capital murder of her 7-week-old daughter. Just a quick trigger warning, the manner in which this baby died is horrific and it's a really tough one to listen to. Baby Khaleesi Jolly was just 7 weeks old when she was brutally murdered by her mother, who was under the influence of drugs. On May 12, 2022, 911 responded to multiple calls of a woman slamming a baby to the ground by its ankles. By the time police arrived, Michaelia Jolly had fled into nearby woods. Baby Khaleesi had suffered horrific injuries. She was taken to hospital, but she died 2 days later. She'd suffered several skull fractures, bleeding and swelling to her brain, hemorrhages to her eyes, and multiple other fractures. There were multiple witnesses to this incident, including Khaleesi's grandmother, and that's going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. Michaelia was apprehended in nearby woods by the police, and it was determined that she was under the influence of drugs when she murdered her daughter. She underwent a mental health evaluation and she was deemed competent to stand trial. She was sent a plea offer on October 31st this year, which allowed her to avoid the death penalty if she pleaded guilty to capital murder. She was given a few days to reply, and she did so and accepted the offer. She apparently said that she has no idea why she did what she did, but she's shown absolutely no remorse for the murder of her 7-week-old baby. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
One of Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire's first agents was a pedophile. This is an extremely disturbing story. So I can't find any real photos online of this guy. I don't know if he's wiped it off the face of the internet, but his name was Robert David Villard, or Bob Villard. He was an acting coach for young and aspiring actors, and he represented a number of the clients that he coached as well. So in 2004, a 17-year-old boy reported to the police that Bob had molested him when he was only 13. Bob pled no contest to the charges, validated the kid's story, and basically tried to put the whole thing behind him, but the internet would never let this story die. That is because he was one of Leonardo DiCaprio's first talent agents, and he took a number of pictures of him, including this picture right here, and even this picture. Now, apparently he represented him for a good while because these are all photos that Bob took of Leo DiCaprio. And since Bob was an agent that represented a bunch of different children, only God knows how many kids he managed to victimize, or how many kids he victimized that stayed silent. So I'm looking at newspapers.com right now. Now this is interesting. This is something that I never found. I should say this is something that I never found talked about in any of these articles, but I think this is the same guy, Robert David Villard. He's right here in a newspaper in 1987. So this was over 15 years before he was charged with actually touching a child. He was caught in a CP sting. I'm finding this out right now for the first time on newspapers.com. Check this out. This is an actual old article. So this is a whole old article from 1987. Look who else is here. Robert David Villard, 40, an agent for child actors. That has to be the same guy. So he was charged with receiving or interstate transportation of CP. That is crazy. So yeah, I guess that just proves once a pedophile, always a pedophile.
Imagine eating your favorite fish and waking up with no arms or legs. Here's my story. Viewer discretion is advised for this video, as the content may be disturbing. However, I urge you to stay tuned for crucial information that could prevent you from enduring a similar ordeal. My name is Laura Varajas, a 40-year-old woman from Mexico, and my nightmare unfolded in August 2023 in California, USA. One fateful morning, I visited a local market I often frequented to purchase fish. I opted for tilapia, a fish widely consumed globally. Little did I know, the tilapia I bought that day was infected with the Vibrio vulnificus bacteria. After cooking and eating the fish at home, I soon began to feel unwell. The fish hadn't been fully cooked, allowing the bacteria to thrive and enter my bloodstream. In the hours that followed, I suffered from intense vomiting, fever, and dangerously low blood pressure. Days later, I was rushed to the hospital, but by then, the infection had spread throughout my body. I was placed in intensive care and put into a medically induced coma. My body went into full septic shock, and my kidneys started to fail. My hands and feet turned black, as did my lips. Despite the doctor's best efforts to save my limbs, on September 14th, they made the harrowing decision to amputate all 4 of my limbs in a bid to save my life from the rampant infection. If my story has touched you, or if you want to learn more about how to stay safe from hidden dangers, tap the follow button. Share this video to spread the word and comment. Stay safe to show your support. Your simple actions could save someone's life. Don't let this be just another scroll by. Act now.
This is Yo Quiero Agua, one of the creepiest execution videos in the world, explained. The video that I'm about to explain is about 30 seconds long, and it's the creepiest and one of the most disturbing videos out there. And whatever you do, don't go searching for it. The video begins with a suspected cartel member with his face completely flayed and skinned, and he is still alive. Now, you don't see this happening, but you do see the aftermath. All of the skin on his face has been completely removed. Nothing that resembles facial features are there anymore. No skin, no lips, no eyelids, absolutely nothing. This video almost doesn't look real, but it has been confirmed to be 100% real. It almost looks like and feels like an 80s slasher film. Throughout the video, it's just his captors mocking him and having a good time enjoying the pain they inflicted on him. They ask him questions throughout the video like, "Do you want water?" which the victim replies, "Yo quiero agua," which means "I want water." The captors continue to just mock and mess with the victim throughout the whole video. It also looks like they skinned some of his chest off too, which I can't even imagine the pain. Now, the video is gory and hard to watch, but that's not really what makes this video disturbing. The video is just honestly extremely creepy. For example, how the guy looks after his face was skinned. The best way I could describe it is that his face was stuck in a constant grin, but he has no face. It's almost like they cut off his face in a way to make him smile permanently. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's an extremely messed up visual. Also, the way the victim sounds while he's talking to his captors is also extremely disturbing. His voice is just so raspy and it almost sounds demonic and not human at all. Now, we all know the video Funky Town, and people who saw Funky Town compare this video to it all the time. Now, it's not Funky Town disturbing, but it is extremely disturbing. All in all, it isn't a pleasant video to look at or watch, and I urge you to never ever go searching for it. This is the cartel baseball bat video, one of the worst execution videos explained. Whatever you do, never go searching for this video. The video that I'm about to explain is about 5 minutes in length, and it opens with a message from the cartel that says the following: "This is what's going to happen to people who betray us." And according to sources, the victim in the video is a police officer. As the video plays, you see a shirtless man in shorts lying on the ground and is also blindfolded. The setting is in an empty concrete room, and there are 2 cartel members in the room with him. The one has a baseball bat, and he then winds up and hits the victim in the side of the body, making sure the victim is not hit in the head. This process is then repeated several times. The victim is hit on the back, stomach, legs, and arms countless of times, all while he wiggles on the floor in unbelievable pain. The video then proceeds to jump cut, and after every one of these jump cuts, you see the bruises on the victim become more visible. According to reports, the victim died from all the striking from the bat, and I can't imagine the pain he was feeling due to internal bleeding, broken bones, and fractures. Later in the video, the victim is lying on his stomach and isn't moving that much. He is then hit with the bat on the back of his neck several times, and this appears to kill the victim or knock him unconscious. The video then jump cuts again, and the victim has been stripped completely naked and appears to be dead. At this point, you see a cartel member carrying a double-sided medieval axe, and he then proceeds to dismember the victim's body. He starts by cutting off the right arm of the victim, and after this, he takes the axe and decapitates the corpse after a couple axe swings. The victim's head is then held up to the camera in the usual cartel style. The video then jump cuts again and continues showing the dismembering process, and the killer with the axe is cutting off the victim's legs at the top of the thigh, at which point the video then concludes. This video is an extremely brutal watch, and I highly recommend you never go searching for it. This is just another one of those videos that makes you aware of the brutality that goes on in this world, and it's absolutely sickening and terrifying.
Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
Imagine coming home one night to find scattered human body parts on your bathroom floor. Justin Barnett was only 23 years old when he vanished in 1995. It was June the 3rd and he was living in Birmingham, Alabama with his ex-girlfriend Sheila Horton. Now Justin had plans to go to a party that night and was due to meet a new girl there. That evening he borrowed his ex Sheila's car and went out to meet some friends for a drink beforehand. After enjoying the drinks, he told his friends that he was off to meet a girl and that he would be back at some point later. However, he never returned. His friends tried to get in contact with him and see where he was, but they couldn't reach him, so they just presumed maybe he's gone home to sleep. When Justin's ex Sheila got back to the house as well at 2 a.m, she noticed he wasn't home. She was a little bit concerned but figured maybe he would be back in the morning. The day after, when he failed to come back home, he was reported missing to police. It would be days later that a worrying discovery was made. Sheila's car was found in Lakeview with no sign of Justin. However, this was particularly suspicious because police had actually searched the area where they did find the car previously and the car hadn't been there. It was an agonizing 2 decades before any news. It was actually January 2015 and a man with a guilty conscience showed up to a police station to make a statement. He was called Jonathan Abney and he was only 18 years old at the time of Justin's disappearance. He had some news that would stun investigators. He'd been living with his older sister Trisha and her boyfriend Jeff Martin at the time of Justin's vanishing. On the night of the 3rd of June 1995, he came home to a scene like that out of a horror film. Dismembered body parts lay all over the bathroom floor and the limbs belonged to Justin. Jonathan had actually met Justin just once previously when he was buying substances. Jonathan told officers that his sister had convinced him to go out that night so she and Justin could have some alone time. However, she had very sinister plans for the evening. Her and her partner planned to rob Justin, but this would go horribly wrong. They ended up stabbing Justin to death and Jonathan had helped the pair get rid of Justin's body. Jonathan then took Sheila's car to the place where police had found it. Now Trisha was arrested and Jeff actually ended his own life shortly after. Trisha was given life in prison without parole and Jonathan was actually given immunity for his confession and cooperation.
This is the awful and disturbing murder of Shanda Sherry, one of the most unsettling true crime cases ever. In the early morning of January 11th, 1992, 12-year-old Shanda Sherry was abducted from her home in Indiana and tortured to death by 4 teenage girls in extremely inhumane ways. Melinda Lovelace, Lori Tackett, Tawny Lawrence, and Hope Rippey, all 4 of these girls had somewhat of an extremely rocky home life growing up, with allegations of molestation and physical abuse from family members. In junior high, Melinda Lovelace started dating a girl named Amanda Heverin. However, their relationship was extremely toxic and they broke up. But fast forward to October of 1991, and this is where Amanda meets Shanda and their friendship turns into a romantic relationship. This angers Melinda and she begins discussing ways to murder Shanda. So Melinda put together a plan to have her 3 friends knock on Shanda's door a little after midnight on January 11th while she hid in the back of Lori's car under a blanket with a knife. The girls would then go and tell Shanda, who they never actually met, that they were friends with Amanda and that they wanted to hang out. But when Shanda got into the car, Melinda jumped out of the back seat and held the knife to Shanda's throat. They then drove Shanda deep into the forest to an abandoned house, where they stripped her naked, tied her up, and brutally beat her for 7 hours straight. Melinda tried to cut Shanda's throat, but the knife was too dull, so instead she just strangled her until she was unconscious. All 4 girls then threw Shanda in the trunk, went back to Lori's house to enjoy soda and clean up. At one point, Shanda woke up and began screaming, so Lori repeatedly stabbed her in the chest multiple times. The girls then got back in the car and drove around for a couple more hours. During the ride, Shanda, who was still alive and stuffed in the trunk, started crying, and when Melinda opened the trunk, Shanda sat up covered in blood with her eyes rolled back in the back of her head. Melinda then beat Shanda with a tire iron until she went conscious. She even said that she felt her skull cave in. They then continued driving until they found a burn pile. They then wrapped Shanda in a blanket, sprayed her with Windex, and covered her in gasoline, and set her on fire, but despite all of this, Shanda was still alive. That was until the girls noticed she was still alive and they went back and set her on fire again, killing her. All 4 girls then left to go eat breakfast while Shanda burnt to death. Melinda Lovelace joked about Shanda's burnt body by saying she looked like the breakfast sausage she was eating. The next day though, Shanda Sherry's body was discovered by 2 hunters. Tony and Hope then broke down and confessed to the police about the murder. And all 4 girls were charged with the murder of Shanda Sherry. Tony was sentenced to 25 years, Hope was sentenced to 35 years, and Lori and Melinda were sentenced to 60 years in prison. But what makes this disturbing and sickening case even more sickening, all 4 of these girls are out of prison and free, walking the earth, despite having little to no remorse of what they did to Shanda Sherry. The Shanda Sherry case remains one of the most disturbing and haunting true crime cases out there, because these were all young teenage girls who were doing something extremely horrible to another girl. This was one of those cases that were extremely hard to read, and rest in peace to Shanda Sherry.
You will not believe this insane plot twist. In 2008, Carolyn Watson and Julian Butchwald were a young religious couple. They were living in Melbourne, Australia, and had been together around 2 years. Julian was driving the pair to a picnic date in the car, but he actually stopped the car suddenly, noticing an animal on the side of the road. Suddenly, something horrific happened. Carolyn's vision went completely black after being blindfolded by a terrifying masked man. All she could work out was she was being stripped off and thrown into a vehicle. The car finally stopped and she took her blindfold off, and she was really relieved to see that her boyfriend was by her side. He'd also been stripped off and the couple were completely in the middle of nowhere. The pair managed to untie themselves, but were having to just wander around aimlessly for a week, trying to find safety. Meanwhile, police were desperately searching for the couple. Family and friends were really concerned, and they knew how out of character this was for the pair to go missing. They sent out air and water search teams, but just couldn't locate the couple. As the missing pair were very religious, they'd actually vowed to be celibate until marriage, but Julian started to suggest that it might be a good idea to break this celibacy in order to keep them warm. Finally, a local farmer found the couple and alerted police. However, they quickly found that the story didn't really add up. Julian soon confessed to police that he'd actually made the whole thing up and he'd staged the kidnapping. His motive was purely to try and get his girlfriend to break their vow of celibacy. This is the UK's most famous missing boy. In September 2007, Andrew Gosden was just 14 years old. He was a very intelligent boy and was top of his class in most classes at school. He was an introvert that usually spent most of his time at home. The day before Andrew went missing seemed completely normal. He went to school, he had some tea, and then he watched some TV. However, on September the 14th, he seemed more irritable than normal. Instead of getting the bus to school that morning like his parents thought he was, he went to a cash point and withdrew £200. CCTV then captures him walking home, where he changed his clothes into a Slipknot t-shirt. When he left the house, he didn't take his charger with him, and he also didn't take £100 that he'd saved up. He didn't take his passport, but he did take his house key, which indicates he was going to come home. He bought a one-way ticket to London and was last seen leaving King's Cross station at about 11:30. Frustratingly, the school had actually tried to contact Andrew's parents to say that he hadn't turned up to school that day, but they dialed the wrong number and left an answer phone message on the wrong phone. His family was completely cleared of any suspicion, and the family and the school and all of the students went to London and they were handing out loads of flyers. Weirdly, a year after this incident, a man came to a police station to say that he had information about Andrew. Now, the police station was unmanned, so the person spoke to this man just over an intercom system and sent a police officer down there. Mysteriously, by the time the police officer arrived, the person had vanished. This is what Andrew might look like now, just being the age that he may be if he's still alive. Theories about this case is that he may have gone to London to meet up with someone or go to a concert. Was he lured there by somebody with bad intentions, or was he just going there for the day, gonna come back, and was at the wrong place at the wrong time and somebody did something bad to him? In 2009, the family paid for a search of the River Thames to try and find some sort of closure. The search did find a body, but it wasn't Andrew's. The most up-to-date information that we have on this case is that 2 men were arrested on suspicion of kidnapping Andrew, but they've actually been released.